As hard as it is to imagine, would you believe that in today's text, this is the only place in all of the Gospels where someone thanks Jesus? After everything we know that Jesus has done in his life and ministry, this is the only example in the text of a gospel where someone remembers to say thank you to Jesus. And that thank you is couched in a most crazy story. Luke is very deliberate at the beginning of our text to put Jesus traveling right on that border between Samaria and Galilee. Interestingly, on that border, neither Galilean or Samaritan would be quite at home. And in that strange place, Jesus comes across 10 lepers. That Jesus would encounter lepers in this no man's land, that's not surprising, for that's probably the only place where lepers would have been welcomed. They're not welcome in their own towns and villages because of their disease. Where else could they go? But Jesus and his disciples could go anywhere. These lepers could not. And finally, out there in the middle of nowhere, they have visitors. And it's Jesus. So no wonder when they see Jesus, they run up to him and cry for mercy. Notice, for mercy, not necessarily healing. But Jesus, being Jesus, not only hears their cry for mercy, but he heals them. He says, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." Now, Jesus gave that instruction to them because in those days, only a religious leader, a priest, could examine a healed leper and say, yes, they are fully clean. And so on behalf of the entire community, I now declare that you can come back in. You're restored. You're one of us. Welcome home. So they get the command to go to the priests and show them that you are healed. And as they were going, each step, they became a little more healed and whole. As they're walking, probably running, they look down and they see their blotched skin slowly scabbing over, and then the scabs falling away. And that probably made them run even faster with joy. And then they saw the pure, clean skin. It's a miracle. And after I see the priests, I can go back home and my life will be restored. And as they're all thinking of this, only one of them had the thought, but maybe I should first turn around, do a 180, and go back and thank Jesus. And that's what happens. The other 9 continued toward the priests, but that one man comes back, and as he sees Jesus a second time, he starts shouting his praise. He falls at Jesus' feet, and he says, thank you, again and again. And incidentally, the root of that Greek word there is doxa, which is the same root for our doxology, that ancient song of praise and thanksgiving that we still sing. This tells us that the healed man not only thanked Jesus, you see, but he also praised Jesus. Taking all of this in now, Jesus looks around and he wonders aloud, but wait a minute, thank you, but weren't there 10 of you? Why are you the only one that returned to give thanks and praise, he asks. And then he says, get up and go, second time. And this time he says, your faith has saved you. Now, here's where Jesus' response gets a little bit confusing. Because, first of all, remember, the other 9 were not there because, frankly, they were doing exactly what Jesus told them to do. They were following directions. It's hard to rebuke them for that, isn't it? They were going to show themselves to the priests, which is exactly what Jesus had just told them to do. And it's also confusing because when Jesus says to the leper a second time, your faith has saved you, he's already been healed. That's why he came back, remember? So why is he made well again? And the confusion comes from our English language because it doesn't reflect the original Greek nuance. In Greek, in verse 15, when Luke, who remember was a medical doctor, records all of this, that the lepers are healed, Luke there is using a medical doctor's term. Your skin is cured, physically, you're healed. But later, when Jesus says to the one returnee, you are made well, that's a different verb. That verb there means more in a spiritual sense. You're now whole, you're delivered, you're saved. That made well is not physical, but spiritual. Healing from an illness, you see, is one thing. But becoming truly whole again and well, feeling delivered and balanced and rescued, being saved, that requires something different. The 10 lepers had enough faith for Jesus to heal them, and he does. They're all healed. Fine, great, good. But only one was made whole, and that's the one who remembered to return and say thanks. So this is the question then, doesn't it, that emerges from our story. What is it then about gratitude that saves us? I want you to keep that question here because I'm going to step this way with an illustration that may help what we're going to leave over here. Okay? So my side illustration is this. I happen to know someone very close to me who happens to live with me who would tell you that she grew up in a house not with 10 commandments but 11. And the 11th commandment is, thou shalt always write thank you notes. Preferably black ink on ivory stationery. You can say thank you in the moment, and that is polite, that's good, that's well-mannered. But your gratitude is not properly and fully expressed until you've written it down on a card, licked the envelope shut, pasted a stamp on it, and walked it to the mailbox. Now think about this. That's more than good manners. It's an action after the event because you've had time to reflect on the giver, on the gift, and you take time because you want to formulate that thought just right so the giver understands what that gift meant to you. Now, let's step back into the story. Think of it like this. All 10 received a gift, but only one remembered to send a thank you note. It's not just enough to say thank you and wave and run off to the priests. The gift of Jesus should make you stop in your track, reflect, want to do a formal note of praise that gives you a connection with the giver. A colleague of mine tells a story that he recently made to a married couple of his congregation. They're now retired. And this couple has always given a full 10% tithe. And they never worried about technicalities, like is the 10% from gross or net or any of that. They just write a check for the full 10% of the tithe. Well, my friend went to them and said, how on the world did you manage that your whole life? Especially when you were young and you had kids and a mortgage and the monthly car payment. And the parishioner said back to my friend, we did that from the very beginning of our marriage because my wife and I were afraid of what would happen if we didn't. Now, my colleague was perplexed, and he tried to clarify. You mean you were afraid of God, what God might get you if you didn't bring in the tithe? He said, no. Were you afraid of what the deacons might think, seeing your giving statement? They said, no, we could care less about the deacons. What we were afraid of is that we would become an ungrateful family if we weren't givers. And we never wanted to be those people. I wonder if that's what the one leper realized when he came back with a thank you note. And this is exactly why the church in our country sets aside one day, 1 week, as a special day of thanks where we remind everybody, you gotta write a thank you note and send it. An intentional time to stop and turn around, even if we were on our way to church, and go back to the feet of Jesus with a thank you. We don't just talk about our thanks. We don't just think about our thanks. We do it. And so let me illustrate that to you right now. I wrote you a thank you note. I want to thank you for showing up this morning in person or on live stream from California to China to Canada. God stitches us together now as a North Hills community, in person, online, regardless where we are. Thank you for setting aside all the other things you could have been doing. Thank you for being a worshiper. Thank you for the ways that I see you live your faith every single day, and for all the ways I don't see you living your faith every single day, because I'm not with you 24/7. When I see a glimmer of that, it always impacts me. Thank you for being the kind of church that, in October, when the Community Assistance Program had a sudden food shortage in its pantry, they knew that the church to call would be North Hills. And 2 weeks later, we responded and filled their pantry. Thank you. Thank you then that the very next month, when we were going to ask for more food, again for CAP, out in the atrium, last year, we increased our Thanksgiving goal to maybe this year in 2024, we could do 50 meals. Last week already, we had 61. Thank you, church, for your generosity. Thank you that when the Baldwin Center Christmas tree went up last week, even without any announcement yet in the Connected, you all knew what to do, and ornaments were flying off that tree and walking out the door. The diaconate president, Allie Bourne, came to me with a wink and said, I guess we should have printed out more ornaments. Thank you. Thank you for bringing your babies and children and teenagers to church and Sunday school. Of all the beautiful sounds produced in this sanctuary, none are more beautiful than the sound of children and crying babies. Thank you. And thank you for all those that serve also in the adult supervised nursery to help us keep the sound of babies and children at a minimum in the sanctuary. Thank you for coming to worship even when your body is tired or when your spirit is dry. You've come to the right place. We'll stand with you. Thank you for engaging in Bible study and small groups and adult education sessions. Thank you, everybody, for serving in leadership roles. Thank you for making music and wrapping up our words of doxology in beauty. I only wish, and maybe we need a schedule for this, that every one of you should have the chance to stand where I am when Mary swells the organ and you respond, and when our singing lifts the roof off this place. I get the best seat in the house. I wish you all could experience it. Thank you. Thank you in advance for whatever monetary support you give to North Hills Church so that we can continue to glorify, gather, and grow. Thank you for your generosity. Speaking of generosity, it simply blows me away. Every fall on that Saturday, rain or shine, when 30 plus of you show up in our grungies at the fall cleanup, I watch you bend over to pick up leaves and to spread mulch and to weed and clean the kitchen. And then the very next day, I see you walk in here and put a check in the offering plate. I just will never get over that. God sees those thank you notes. Thank you. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for stumping me or an elder or deacon with incredibly good, deep questions of life. Keep those questions coming, and I thank you in advance. Thank you for your sense of humor with me and the council and the staff. None of us claims to be perfect. And thank you for not letting any one of us take ourselves too seriously. Thank you, every single one of you, because you're all salt in a tasteless world. You are all a little kernel of yeast in a world that is weighed down by itself. Thank you for your paid work, your volunteer work, in your daily work, how you live out your baptism. And that matters, trust me. It matters to me, it matters to the world, it matters deeply to the God who has both healed and saved you. Thank you. That 10th leper had it right. So did Jesus, of course. Being filled with gratitude, and the full-throated expression of it changes lives and saves us. Without gratitude, it's just leprosy gone healed. With gratitude, the healing becomes a new life. 10 were healed. Only one thought to come back with a thank you note. Are you that one? Amen.